Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another screencast presentation. My name is Mitchell Parsonage. I'm an applications engineer at Modena Design Centers, and today I want to talk to you about Enscape. Um, Enscape is a third-party visualization application that attaches itself directly onto Revit, so it is a plugin. Not only with Revit, in this particular case, Enscape is compatible with a few CAD software. So we've got Revit, SketchUp, Rhino, as well as ArchiCAD. And always important to just note that Revit LT is not supported because LT does not support plugins at all. So the Enscape software is a real-time rendering application which once installed attaches itself into your Revit ribbon at the top here in your tab section. There is a free 14-day trial that you can get from enscape3d.com to figure out if it's something that you would make use of. It is quite an affordable application and it is a yearly rental as well. So I just want to show you a couple of the features and just some of the benefits that Enscape actually provides. So again, being a real-time rendering application, what that means is if you've ever rendered in Revit before, you'll know that rendering can take anywhere from 10 seconds to a few hours, depending on things like the materials used, the lighting that's in the scene, the amount of vegetation, the amount of RPC objects that you have, and the quality. So there are quite a few different things that come into play when you're rendering inside Revit, but with Enscape, all of that is sort of just negated because to demonstrate, I'm going to come here to a 3D view, I'm going to go to my Enscape tab, and I'm going to select Start. And because it's a plugin, it's going to open an additional screen, which is the Enscape software, and it attaches itself directly back to your Revit project. So whatever you've got displaying in Revit at that moment is what's going to display in Enscape, but obviously with advanced textures and materials and graphics, etc. Okay, so here in Enscape, we can see that the realism has already gone up quite a large amount. Yeah. You'll notice there's a very clean interface as well. There's no tools, there are no material assignments that get done here in Enscape. Enscape is basically a viewer for the software. So it just takes the components you've got in your Revit or any other CAD application and it just renders them based on the materials that you've assigned to it. So everything comes from Revit. Nothing's really done inside of Enscape. If you want to change materials, you do so in Revit. So again, the fact that it's real-time means that I can change information in my Revit model and I can have it update here in Enscape. So I'm going to create a view exactly like this in Revit, just to also show you the differences between the Revit graphics and the Enscape graphics. Okay, so roughly the same image over here. I'm going to set it to a realistic level of detail. If you look at realistic level of detail and you look at Enscape, you can see that there is quite a massive difference between the two. Obviously, this is not a rendered scene inside of Revit, so I could still render this and I could make it look a lot better. But that rendering process is the thing that takes a lot of time. So including the scene setup that you have to do, where you assign materials to all your various items and place them where you want them, you still then have to go through the process of actually rendering, which can sometimes take up to a few hours. So all you have to do using Enscape is just assign your Revit materials as you want them, and Enscape produces the finished product for you automatically. And if you are unhappy with the placement of objects, you can change things on the fly, which is always great. So if I select this chair right now and I just move it into a better position, I don't have to re-render that scene. Okay, that's already being done for me in the background. So any changes that you make to your model are able to just be instantly reflected here in Enscape without starting a new session. There's no synchronization button or anything like that. Everything is just real time. You'll notice at the moment that I'm busy flying around. Okay, I'm able to pass through walls, I'm able to go through ceilings and floors and things like that. That is because Enscape has this fly mode where you're able to just navigate around your project freely, which makes it a very, very useful tool for model verification as well. If you have areas of your project like corners like this, where you've got joins, or maybe you've got a ceiling space where you've got a lot of ducting going through and you want to test for clashes and things like that, Enscape is a really nice tool to just get into those spaces that aren't always easy to access in your modeling software. So looking at a ceiling space in Revit, is alright, we can do it, it's fine, but Enscape is a lot easier just because we've got that freedom of movement available to us. So it provides for that as well. If I press spacebar, I will enter into a walk mode. And in a walk mode, we've got things like physics and collision detection coming into play, so I cannot pass through a wall anymore. Okay, I can only pass through things that Revit sees as a doorway. And if I'm going down the stairs, it will create a little bump effect, signifying that I'm actually changing my height as I'm going down the stairs. Okay, and again, I can collide with objects and not be able to pass through them. I can only go through things that are actually represented as a doorway. Okay, so I'm going to press space again just to go back into my fly mode. If I hold down shift and my right mouse button, I can change the time of day, my Enscape model as well. Okay, you see I've put a little dial there in the bottom right hand corner just to get real-time shadows and things like that into play as well. Okay, so again, because this is a third-party application and it tacks onto Revit, whatever I do in Revit gets reflected in Enscape, which allows us some interesting opportunities. For example, if I apply a section box to this 3D view, okay, I'll see that a little bar will come up here just saying that Enscape is basically regenerating. I'm going to select this box and I'm going to cut my model roughly in half, more or less. Okay, and whenever you're doing bigger functions like this, that bar will continuously come up. It happens very quickly though, because it's just reflecting these changes in Enscape. So Enscape actually cuts its information as well to mimic whatever you're doing in Revit. So this also allows you the ability to produce very realistic looking sectional elevations. Okay. Where there are a number of things you can do with this, you can export this as a still image into Revit, and you could start to detail on it as well, or do tagging, put in text notes and things like that. So there is quite a high level of realism that you can get out of Enscape with doing minimal work. The only work that you have to do is setting up your scene and putting in the materials, but the rendering is then taken care of for you. So I'm just going to switch this section box off. Okay, and then it will just regenerate again, bring me back my full model. Okay, and have a look at some of the presets that Enscape comes with. So you'll notice that my background at the moment, for instance, is just this blue sky with sort of a, not really any sort of ground cover that it looks like. Nothing's too realistic here. So I can change this skybox file. Skybox file is basically this whole world that I see around me. If I go back to my Revit and I go to Enscape tab and I go to settings, remember anything that you change for Enscape, you're changing from inside of Revit. So I can go to settings, I've got a little atmosphere section over here, and I've got a couple of preset horizons that I can choose from. So forest, construction site, town, etc. Just to quickly show you what that looks like, if I select forest and I go back to my Enscape, okay, it'll just load in a skybox file that looks like that. In addition to these, I can actually go and place my own skybox file. So I can identify a spot in the world using one of the mapping services. I can copy it and I can go and create my own skybox file that I can then load in. I'll give it a second just to update. Okay, and that comes through as well. I found that these skybox files are really good and useful for interior shots, just to give yourself a bit of context. Very realistic looking trees, of course, because it literally is a photo of what's there in reality. So you get quite a lot of realism out of that as well. I'm just going to go ahead and switch that back to just none for now. Okay, we've also got general settings, where we've got a few different styles we can choose from, like just creating the whole model just as white, just as sort of a bit of a presentation effect. Okay, like a polystyrene model. Okay, a couple of other different presets that we have available to us. And we've got a number of exposure sort of settings, field of view, motion blur, etc. And we've got quite a few different tabs that we can come in here, and we can play with some of the settings to achieve a lot of different results. Okay, so I'm again just going to set that back to nothing. And I'm also going to set this back to just its default as well. Do all of that. What I can do as well is I can obviously create my renders. I can create still images, I can do panoramas, and I can do walkthroughs as well. So all I need to do is position myself at the scene that I want rendered. I can go back to Revit, and I can say render image. I can say render image or render image into document. So one creates a rendering here inside of Revit, and the other one allows you to export an external image file that you could send to someone. So if I wanted to put it into Revit, I could just say render image into document. And that import gets brought into your rendering section here in your project browser. In addition to creating these stills, what you can do is also create walkthroughs as well. I'm just going to come back to Enscape over here, position myself wherever it is that I want to. I'll start roughly in the same spot again actually. Go back to Revit. I can say video editor, bring Enscape back up, and I'll see that I've got a little bit of information down here. So very, very simple. I can just choose my initial location like I've got here, say add keyframe, move myself to the next view that I want, add keyframe. You'll see that what Enscape does is it actually puts little cameras down and it shows you where the first scene was, where the second scene was, and then I could go to, let's say I just wanted one more down here, and I could say add keyframe to that as well. So I can see that I've got a 12-second video over here, and I can just select preview. Okay, it's looking really jumpy at the moment, so I'm actually going to press escape and just stop that. That's more than likely due to my settings, my quality settings. So if I go back to Revit, select settings, come here to capture, see I've got my resolution set to 4K. So if I drop that down to just 1080p, that's going to most likely work much better for me. So I'm going to go back to Enscape and I'm going to select preview again. Okay, much better, and you can see it's just going from one keyframe to the next keyframe and obviously to a final keyframe as well. So really, really user-friendly, easy controls in Enscape as well, and I can obviously export that out as an external file if I wanted to do that as well. Okay, I can also export this as what is called an exe file. So if I do that, what it allows me to do is create a file that is roughly about 100 megabytes. Obviously, it's going to differ according to the project that you're working on, but roughly that size. And in that file contains basically an install file of Enscape, but one that just allows you to double-click and launch the application without actually having it installed on your PC. And you also don't need the Revit software. So what that means is that we can take this model that we've got in Enscape right now, okay, export this as an exe file, and we could send that to anyone that we wanted to. And when they receive that file, all that their computer has to be able to do is have the system requirements to run Enscape. They don't need to have Enscape, they don't need to have Revit, they don't need to have any other software on their computer at all. They'll be able to just double click on it, and it will launch them into exactly what I've got here. They will be able to actually move around the model, they will be able to look at things, they'll be able to change the time and day and things like that. All they won't be able to do is obviously attach it to Revit, so they won't be able to change anything model-based. But it allows them to visualize the space and actually look inside their project and see what's going on. Okay, so Enscape can do a lot more. There are a lot of really, really awesome features in here. You can also export images, panoramas that you've created as a QR code that you can send to people, and basically any iPhone or Android phone has a free QR scanner that you can get. You can scan that code and you have that panorama on your phone. You just move your phone around and you can actually look at the image and what you're looking at all the way around you. So it's got some really interesting features in like that as well, and just a ton of other things. And obviously playing with the combinations of all of the settings, that's going to give you different outputs for basically every single image that you do. Okay, so there's a lot more that I could cover, but I just wanted to give you a very brief overview of the software. If you have any questions, let me know and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. Thanks very much for watching.